Okay, my name is Lawrence McGlynn, and you're listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor here on WPPM 106.5 FM in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Blue Sky at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHM Tonight on the program, we'll be joined by City Controller Christy Brady to discuss school district finances and Vision Zero progress. Miguel Adrande from the Pennsylvania Immigrant Coalition will be here to talk with Vanessa Maria Graber, and Lance Haber will discuss the city's property tax system, which is going to be interesting because we've been talking about that for a while, and there's always something new to talk about there. Before we get into this, though, there's something I just want to bring up at the top of the show that annoyed me. So I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Today there was a hearing at City Council. It's the only one that's happened over the summer, and it was about what happened at the Pride Parade back in June. And we all saw the videos of what was happening to people who were there by the police. We saw this. The videos were easy to see. They were all shared all over the place. And we're going to talk. I'm going to have a whole article about this in the Hall Monitor newsletter, which is going to come out later in the week. But there's something I just want to talk about right now before we get into the rest of the show. The only hearing that's been happening that happened over the summer was today, right? And it's important. We need to listen to the LGBTQ community when things like this happen. Things like this should never happen, but when it does, we need to hear them. We need to find out, for a lot of reasons, this is really important. When you open a council hearing, you're supposed to have, most city council committees have 7 members. You need 4 to open, okay? They didn't have that this morning at 10 o'clock. It took until about 10 minutes after. They had to appoint somebody to the committee to get it started, which is something that they do. And, a couple other council members did come in, notably Councilmember Brooks and Councilmember O'Rourke showed up. Councilmember Ahmad was there. She's not on the committee. But honestly, I don't know why most, if not all, the council members were there. It's the only hearing they've had over the summer, and it's really, really important because we're talking about civil rights here. We're talking about a community that historically has had problems with the police and just in general. So why wasn't everybody there to show support and just listen, even if you didn't have questions, just hear what people had to say and get an idea for that. And I don't understand why we can't do that for people in this city when it's clear that something egregious happened to them. And all of us should be looking at that and saying, well, what do we all do about this? And I just don't understand why City Council wasn't there today, or all the City Council members weren't there today. So what we're going to do here is play our interview with City Controller Christy Brady first, and here it is. All right, City Controller Christy Brady, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So first thing I'd like to ask you, remind everybody, what does the city controller do? We all know what the office is, but sometimes, people aren't clear.
So the controller's office is independent of the mayor and city council. We conduct independent audits and analysis that provide objective, independent information to city officials like city council, the mayor, and to the public and other interested parties just about the city's financial affairs and other ways that we can improve city operations.
And what kind of role do you play in the city budget process?
So during the city budget process, first we have our own budget that we have to present in front of city council, but we're actually independent of the process. It's really, I explain it to people that this is a process between the mayor and city council. But once city council approves that budget, then we audit the spending.
And what does that look like for you when you start getting into the weeds on that? How does that work?
So we'll go into a department and look at their payroll, expenditures. We may do a performance audit. on that department. So there's different ways that we can test these expenditures, whether if it's payroll or other or expenditures other than payroll. And we also look at the revenues too.
Do you randomly pick offices every year, or are there recommendations that come from different places?
Yes, so we're changing up how we're doing our departmentals. We're doing a overall analytical review of each city department to see if there's something unusual that pops out. We scour what's going on in each department to see if there's something that is an issue that needs to be audited. So right now, we're doing a performance audit of OPA and BRT, looking at how they value properties and also the appeal process. That's like one example.
It's good to hear that.
Yes,
That's
yes,
interesting. Okay.
yes.
And what is a performance audit exactly?
So a performance audit is looking at maybe the efficiency or effectiveness of an operation. So it's a targeted objective. And in this case, we want to look to see how they're, for example, for OPA and BRT, we want to look at the appeals process. Why does it take so long? Is it fair? We also want to look to see how they're valuing properties in OPA because it's not transparent, and there and certain other procedures, and maybe even compare them to other cities. Is there a best practice? That sort of thing.
And when will that be complete?
So it's right now, we're in the middle of testing. So I'm hoping by maybe end of the year, maybe the beginning of next year, we're hoping.
Oh, that'd be great. I'm going to look
Yes.
forward to that, and we're going to have you back to talk about that once it
Oh,
gets
I
there,
would
because
love to. Yes,
we hear
anytime.
we hear about property taxes and assessments all the time. So,
Yes. Yeah, we
um,
receive a lot of complaints about that. And we actually are requesting people that if they do have an issue with the appeal process, to call our office. So
okay.
you can contact our office, controller@phila.gov, if you want to give us feedback that will help us in our audit.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yes.
So, in your Money Matters newsletter, which I recommend people subscribe to because there's a lot of great stuff in this.
Thank you.
Um,
I'm very proud of it.
yeah, I read it every time it comes out because
Mhm.
there's and I think people should, because it's interesting. You focus on different things that are happening in the city. So even if you're not necessarily interested in local government, it's good to know what's happening and who's keeping an eye on things.
Right.
One of your most recent newsletters talked about the Vision Zero program, which was aimed at reducing traffic deaths to zero by 2030.
Mhm.
What did you find there, and what kind of progress are we making here?
One of the reasons why I wanted to do this is because it's summer, and I know that August is Traffic Awareness Month, and people are out on bikes, people are just outside more, and we wanted to look into the program. It was something that I wanted to look into to see the city's progress, and what I was a little surprised about that the latest data that we saw back in 2020, it was over 10 people per 100,000 in traffic deaths. Uh, the latest data that we have, it was 8 point, I think it was 6 in 23, and it actually went up in 24. But this city is investing in Vision Zero and partnering with organizations like the PPA and PennDOT to invest in this program and reduce, because they do want to have that goal of reaching zero. But right now we are not doing well as compared to other peer cities.
Were there any indications as to why that might be?
No, I don't think there was any indication. It could be just plain and simple aggressive driving, people's driving habits since COVID. It could be that. But this was just bringing light to the program and the city's investment into the program.
Okay, good. Um, turning to schools, and that has been a topic of interest lately for many reasons, including this week. Um, your office, and maybe the best way to put this is maybe found some deficiencies in record keeping and how things are looked at.
Right.
People should go and take a look at that, and I think it's interesting. But what I'm more curious about when you go into this, like an entity as large as the school district, right?
Mm.
Are you almost expecting to find some things that just don't add up and that have to be looked at? Because we're talking about a huge enterprise here, you know. Um, what do you go in expecting when you start looking at these things?
So every year we audit the school district's financial statements to make sure that they're fairly presented. Since COVID, we haven't, because of COVID, we weren't going into the schools, and recently we've been going back into the schools and performing audits of like personal property and payroll and that sort of thing. And so in a way, when you get away from looking at uh, certain areas, you'll and things were unchecked, you'll tend to find something. So it doesn't surprise me that we did have some findings with not finding property items in the schools. I used to be an auditor in this in the controller's office. You probably know my background, that I've been working here for over 30 years. And my first job was actually auditing the school district. And I remember going out and searching for certain items and finding many, but a lot of times things walk, things like computers and other and what we found this time was like audiovisual equipment. And so you do want to take when you go out to audit personal property items, which means you go to their personal property records, you select certain items, you go to the school, you search for them. While you're at the school, you also pick items, and then you go back to the records. Um, Sometimes you want to look at things that are going to walk, and that's what we did.
And the report, I believe, found $300,000 worth of items that weren't accounted for.
Yes, yes,
That's significant. That's
yes.
significant. And so is the process like you get a team of your people and say, okay, we're going to this school and it's going to take maybe a couple weeks? What does that look like?
So uh, we that's part of auditing is select, you want to, yes, we do get a team. We select this, we decide on the schools. It's through a sample. So we select a sample of schools, and then we select a team of auditors to go out and look for property items. They also went and looked at student activity funds. That's accounts that are for activities of each school for that are held for students, like prom, or for a specific sports team, or maybe a music program. It's funds that the students raise for the for programs that the school district holds and uses for the program.
And there was about $200,000 in inactive activity accounts that I think
Right.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Um, how long did it take to put that report together from the beginning where we say, okay, we're going to do this to now it's on the website?
So this report is part of our audit of the financial statements. So the purpose of this report has to do with the internal controls over financial reporting in relation to the financial statements. It sounds a little technical, but so when we start auditing the financial statements, it starts prior to when we get those statements. So we try and go out and look at. So right now, or actually we've just finished back in May and June, going out to the schools in anticipation of this fiscal year ends financial statements. The financial statements aren't prepared yet, but this is our control testing when we go out to the schools at the end of the school year to look at um, uh, payroll records out of the schools, the student activity funds, and personal property records. So we go out to the schools at the end of the school year. Then during the summer, we'll do bank confirmations and things like that. And then come maybe October, we'll get the financial statements, and then we start really getting into the nitty gritty of testing that. Our opinions issued around the end of January, and shortly after that, we communicate our findings to the school district, and then we work out the details and then issue a report, which is the report that you're talking about.
Okay, so it's always an ongoing process, is what it sounds like.
Yes, it's annual. Yes, yes. It's an
Okay.
annual process, and we do certain things at certain times. Yes.
And I do recommend people take a look at some of these things because there's a lot of good information there, especially if you're interested in what's going on in the school district, if you're interested in any of these things. It's really important to understand your end of it, how
Yeah.
you look at it and how the logistical part gets done and the financial part gets done.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to bring in Denise Clay Murray here on Philadelphia Hall Monitor.
Hi, and thank you so much for joining us today, Controller Brady. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Good to be here, Denise.
One thing I've always wondered when you all do these audits, like audits of the school district and audits of certain city departments and stuff, once those reports are issued and you all have had a conversation with the department, if you find something illegal, what are you able to do with that?
If we found something illegal, we would report it to the appropriate authorities. So whatever information we have, we would put it in a package and give it to whoever the appropriate authority is.
Okay. And recently you all did an audit that looked at auto fatalities
Yes.
here in Philadelphia. And I found that fascinating because sometimes I get on the road with my fellow Philly drivers, and it's kind of like, navigating the Indianapolis 500 plus the Autobahn all at once. Can you talk a little bit about that report and what you found and what you're hoping the city does with it? Or can you say that?
Well, so this was one of our monthly Municipal Money Matter economic reports. And what I wanted to do was just highlight what Vision Zero Philadelphia was and use the most recent data of where we are at. The city has made some progress. I mentioned in the report that back in 2020, it was over 10, the fatalities were over 10 per 100,000 people. That number has gone down, and we're hoping with the investments that they just put into the city's 5-year plan, they're putting in 30 million over the next 6 years. That really helps with education and speed limits and other traffic calming measures or cameras.
Okay. Now, every once in a while, I'll be on the internet and someone will say the parking authority needs to be audited for a variety of reasons. Either the fact that they don't like the fact that you have to go 25 miles an hour down Broad Street now, or because the whole idea behind the state takeover of the parking authority was to provide the school district with the money it needs to function after it's paid all its bills. And yet it seems like that money never comes because I guess the parking authority has infinite bills. Is the parking authority something you'd be able to audit, or does somebody else have to do that?
So a few years back, we actually did an audit on the parking authority, but we were restricted to on-street parking. But in that report, it does include the calculation of how that money flows to the district, and part of it is how much they make. And there's escalator of how much the parking authority is supposed to give to the city, and then above that, the rest goes to the school district. And that calculation is part of a regulation that they have to follow. But we do have a municipal money matters on school district funding that showed that in 2025, the school district received no money because of this formula from the school district received no money from this formula from the parking authority. So they can either increase revenues, which they're tied to, or reduce their expenditures. That's the only way, because it has to deal with net profits.
Okay. And just one final question.
Mhm.
When I wrote a book about that kind of explains gun violence to kids. And one of the resources that I used, and I used it a lot because it was really, really good, was the controller's tracker of gun violence in the city, and how it manifests itself, where the hotspots are and all of that. Is that still up? Can people still access it?
Yes, it is. Yes, yes. There was a glitch with the website of the cities where we pull that information from, and so it had. And once we noticed that glitch happening, we had to temporarily take it down, but it is back, and it is right on the homepage of our website. I felt that was very important to make sure that we kept that going, because it is an important tool, and I like that visualness of what's happening with tracking these.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for giving us some of your time today. I'm going to give you back to Lawrence McGlynn, my co-host, and you are listening to Philadelphia Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5.
All right. Thank you, Denise. Controller Brady, before we let you go, can you remind people where they can reach you to talk about the property assessments, any information you'd like to pass on regarding that?
Yes, so if anybody has an issue with their property assessment or the appeal process, please contact our office. You can email us at controller@phila.gov, and there is a phone number to call. I can get that in a second. I don't know if I have it off the top of my head. It is, do you have that number? See. It's 215-686. I know it's on our social media, but I'm trying to get the number. But if you email controller@phil.gov, and you can tell us what your issue is, it will help us with feedback for our audit. Oh, it is 215-686-3804. And any information that gives us feedback to help us in our audit will be very much appreciated, because we need to hear from people's experiences, and that will help us guide where the issues are in the performance audit that we're currently doing.
And when should people have that information to you?
I would like it as soon as possible. The audit is ongoing right now, so the sooner the better.
Okay, great. And where can people find all these great reports and all the great information that you provide?
So you can find our reports on our website at controller.phila.gov.
All right. Well, City Controller Christy Brady, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes,
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time, and thank you for everything that you do.
All right, we'd like to thank Controller Brady for joining us on the program, and now we'd like to bring on Vanessa Maria Graber to tell us a little bit about an interview she just did.
Hello. Thanks. I interviewed Miguel Andrade from the Pennsylvania Immigration Coalition. And if you remember, back in April, we did some coverage about the package of ICE outbills that City Council passed, and all of the organizing and rallies that they had leading up to that. Well, the bills were supposed to take effect July 7th, And so far, we haven't really seen anything. And so more than 60 organizations signed on to a letter asking Mayor Parker and her administration to please implement the bills. It's a package of 7 bills. One of them is about face mask coverings, and there are some federal stipulations around that make it hard to implement. But the other 6 have to do with things that are happening on city property and within city agencies. And so the coalition is working in partnership with dozens of other organizations to provide resources and help and advocacy to the immigrant population in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. And last week they were in Harrisburg doing advocacy against detention centers. So let's bring up that interview. And again, it's really extraordinary that this particular video package, this legislative package was passed. It's historic legislation, and Philadelphia is a sanctuary city, and so it is really important that we have these bills in place in order to protect immigrants from ICE. And the other thing is, if we've seen like a real increase in ICE raids and in people getting sent to detention centers, not just in Philadelphia, but all over South Jersey and across the country. All right, I found the video. Now we can pull it up and play it. Hello, welcome back to the Philadelphia Hall Monitor. My name is Vanessa Maria Graber, and I'm here with Miguel Andrade of the Pennsylvania Immigration Coalition. And today we're going to talk a little bit about a package of ICE bills that were passed that are being held up at City Hall, and a recent action led by Pennsylvania Immigration Coalition in Harrisburg. Thank you for joining us.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
So a couple of months ago, your coalition was successful in passing a historic package of bills here in Philadelphia that supported immigrants and is currently not being implemented. Can you remind our listeners and viewers a little bit about what the package of bills contained and what is currently happening with the legislation?
Yeah, the package of the ICE bills basically mandated that the city of Philadelphia do not use any of their resources, of Philadelphia municipal resources, to aid and abide ICE and in their mission to hunt down immigrant members of the community. So it means not having access, not allowing ICE to have access to our city databases, making sure that people are trained within City Hall to not ask for immigration status, that they're trained on what to do if ICE shows up to their location, to prevent the masking of ICE agents in the city of Philadelphia. And as of right now, the bills have gone into effect already, but they are not being implemented here in the city right now.
So 6 of the 7 bills were supposed to take effect July 7th. What has happened since then, and what are you asking of Mayor Parker's administration?
Yeah, so as of right now, nothing is happening with these bills, unfortunately. We do know that a lot of community members, especially other members of the coalition, have been getting questions from their community members across the city. People know that a package of bills was passed, that we celebrated it. But people have no idea what these bills look like in implementation because there hasn't been, which is why on July 28th, we delivered a letter that was signed on by more than 60 community organizations in the city demanding that the Parker administration implement these bills ASAP.
So let's review some of the measures. One of the bills, because again, it is a bill package, codifies the city's longstanding commitment to not participating in collaboration agreements with ICE, prohibits city agencies, including police, from collaborating with ICE and other federal civil immigration enforcement agents absent a judicial warrant. And for that one, are you waiting for the Philadelphia Police Department to issue some sort of policy or statement? in terms of, no more collaborating, or have they already not been collaborating with ICE? What's your understanding of that?
It's a little bit unclear as to like what extent the collaboration has gone and extends to. Under our sanctuary city policies and welcoming city policies, there should be no collaboration between the local police department and ICE. But we know that ICE doesn't stop just because we say don't do it, right? They're going to try and do their maneuvering. They're going to try and go around the law, which is why the implementation of these bills and what we were asking for of the park administration in this letter was so important. We needed to have, we're demanding immediate trainings for all city employees on these bills, required signage in the city facilities that spell out what people's rights are. We need to have a process about reporting and addressing potential violations, because we do know that violations do happen with any law that gets passed. We need to identify the department responsible for implementation. We need to have public benchmarks and deadlines for full compliance, and also just regular reporting from the city. Mind you, we're asking all of this because none of this has happened yet, even though the the bills went into effect on the 7th of August.
Yeah, and they had several months before then to study the bill and think about implementation plans. Some of the other measures include prohibiting city agencies from collecting information on people's citizenship or immigration status and sharing that information or other personal data with ICE. I imagine that would be really important training for people working for the Department of Health, Department of Housing, many other city departments.
Every department. I mean,
Right.
that's the big thing about some of these bills, is about making sure that Philadelphians are able to have access to the services that our city provides, our medical centers, our libraries, our schools. People need to be trained, because we know that ICE is gonna do what they do, right? They're gonna break the laws. They're gonna hunt down people. They're gonna barge in places. Our people, our employees need to be trained on what to do in those instances. If we're really saying that we are a city that protects our immigrant communities, which the bills were passed and signed into law, we have been saying that we support immigrant communities, but we need to see it in action.
Correct. The other measures say prohibit discrimination based on citizenship or immigration status by city agencies, employers, housing providers, or businesses. And we all know when you start a new job, you receive a training, right, on equal opportunity, sexual harassment, all of these things. So I imagine they need to implement a citywide training program on that, barring ICE from conducting raids on city-owned properties. And we've seen ICE roll up in different parts of the country on schools, in parks and health centers, all kinds of places that are both owned by the city and state. Ban ICE access absent a judicial warrant to city-owned spaces, including libraries, health centers, shelters, and rec centers. And one might expect that there would be signage on all of those places, letting people know that this is a safe space and that judicial warrants are required. So far, we've seen nothing. Is that correct? Like literally nothing.
We have seen absolutely nothing. We haven't even had a meeting with the park administration, which is another one of the demands that we're asking for. The administration to meet with the coalition of members who are most affected by this, and who implement and who worked with city council to create some of these law packages. That also hasn't happened. I also want to point out that none of these bills are anything outrageous or crazy that's had never been seen before. Like, other cities in the country have similar provisions. Chicago comes to mind. I believe their policies for protecting their immigrant population are very similar to the ones that we're passing here. So there's no reason why we can't be doing it and should be doing it already.
And have you had communication from the two bill sponsors, city council members Kendra Brooks and Rue Landau?
We have had communication with them, and they echo our sentiment on making sure that these bills are implemented and that community members are properly trained, and that city employees are also properly trained. So they do share our concern that nothing has been happening yet.
What can our viewers and listeners do if they want to support your efforts in helping this become implemented citywide?
The great thing is that every little bit helps. So if you want to tag the park administration on social media and ask them, like, hey, what are we doing with these ISAP bills? That would be great. I think also contacted your local council member and letting them know that you are, also curious about when these bills are going to be implemented, and to make sure that there's full transparency with them as well.
Okay, now Pennsylvania Immigrant Coalition recently had an action. You took a huge delegation of folks to the state's capital in Harrisburg last week. Tell us what you were doing there.
We were at Harrisburg at the Capitol building for our immigrant communities Make PA Strong rally, basically demanding at this point that Governor Shapiro take a stand and very simple demands. One, issue an emergency removal order to shut down the Abraxas Child Detention Center, a known child detention center here in our state that has decades and documented cases of abuse against children. We want the state to end state collaboration with ICE, including access to our state databases. I want people to know that if you have a PEN.ID, ICE has access to that information. We want our state to keep our private information private. We want to also ensure that there's an expansion on protection of immigrant communities across the state. And these are all things that Governor Shapiro can do tomorrow, today, if he really wanted to. We know that his administration keeps saying that they have no authority to do some of these things, but we just know that they're in the wrong here. They absolutely could shut down a child detention center tomorrow.
Now, the Shapiro administration also recently confirmed just last week that the proposed ICE detention centers in Berks and Schuylkill counties will not move forward. These were large warehouses that were going to house up to 9,000 people. And it looks like, the governor was able to shut that down, those efforts down, and those administrative orders means that those warehouses cannot be used as detention centers. That is a victory, I would say, for your movement. Were you all advocating against those proposed detention centers as well?
Absolutely. I would actually argue that it wasn't Governor Shapiro that stopped those bills. It was the community organizing that was happening in Upper Bourne Township and Tremont. These folks have been organizing for months, and they were challenging the use of local infrastructure and public resources for detention. And they all made it very clear that they would not accept ICE expanding in their own backyards. So Governor Shapiro did the right thing and listened to his constituents, what they were saying, and did what he needed to do. And that's what we need him to do at the statewide level.
Yeah, and I don't really want to compare them to data centers, but when you have a warehouse housing 7,500 people in Tremont, for example, that does put a lot of, water and power usage at play as well. And so I do see that commonality with people organizing against these intrusive, forces coming into their towns across the city. And it does seem pretty unimaginable to think of a warehouse housing 7,500 people. I read somewhere online that over 400,000 people had been arrested in the last 2 months across the country in ICE detainments. Can you talk about how that has increased in Philadelphia and in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, we definitely know that these detention centers, even whatever they look like on paper, we know that the reality is that they would be horrible. There would be warehouses of torture, essentially. We know what has been happening in other detention centers. We saw what happened with Alligator Alcatraz before that got shut down. We are seeing what is happening at Delaney Hall over across the bridge in Jersey. So not only is it the human right aspect of the amount of violations that happen in these detention centers, but as you were mentioning, the expansion of these centers in areas where, let's be honest, the infrastructure is already weak, right? We don't fund infrastructure in our country. There's areas of Pennsylvania that need medical centers, that need better access to their schools, that need their water services upgraded, and the state was willing to spend millions of dollars in trying to create warehouses to lock up people rather than invest in the infrastructure of our constituents, of the Commonwealth. Yeah, I mean, we know that ICE is continuing to expand their operations. They were just given a huge billion-dollar deal by the federal government. It just feels like it's a machine right now that is being fueled by money to spread fear and terror. But that doesn't mean that we locally can't push back and stop. And as we mentioned earlier, we have, and we can continue to do it.
Yeah, and something that I want people to realize is that we're seeing a lot of really important investigative journalism that is uncovering a lot of the human rights abuses and really detrimental conditions happening inside these detention centers. Medical neglect, which has led to several deaths already, especially at places like Delaney Hall. Claims of sexual violence. Claims of people not being able to eat the food being completely inedible, people being sent to solitary confinement, including children, teenagers. And so it's not just that we don't want people detained, or advocates don't want people detained. But it's also the kind of abuses that are happening here and quickly escalating across the country. And for folks who may not realize this, the overwhelming majority of people being detained have no criminal record, no criminal activity. And these are not prisons, right? And however, what we're seeing is that a lot of the people being detained, including children, families, mothers, elderly people, are suffering the same type of abuses that we often see in prisons and other torture camps around the world. And when folks are being sent to these third countries and places like Secot in El Salvador, they often don't have even the regulations, right, or documentation of the torture and abuses that are happening. Have you all been following these cases, and what can you tell us about facilities like Moshannon here in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I mean, at Moshannon, there's documented cases of abuse that have happened there throughout the years. There have also been deaths. There have been, as you were mentioning, physical and sexual abuse happening within these detention centers. We are part of also the Shutdown Detention campaign, and we are focusing on Moshannon as well. There's just no reason to be locking anybody else in our state in these conditions. There's no reason to be detaining people this way. It's like, where's the humanity? And it gets nailed down into a political issue, but at the end of the day, this is a human rights issue. And I can't believe we still have to ask elected officials to think about people's humanity, but here we are.
Well, Miguel, I thank you for the report. We hope you'll continue to keep us updated on your efforts and campaigns to keep immigrants safe and have a dignified life here in Philadelphia and in Pennsylvania. Can you tell our listeners and viewers where they can find more information about some of these efforts and how they can get involved?
Absolutely. The best way would be to check out our website, paimmigrant.org. Specifically, you can go to paimmigrant.org/shutdown-detention, and you'll find multiple ways of getting involved throughout the state of Pennsylvania. We're a member organization of 60 member organizations across the state, so there's definitely ways that people can get involved.
Yes, and if you are an immigrant or family member of immigrants, there are lots of really great resources on their website, many know your rights guides, directories. And if you have a story that you would like to share, definitely reach out to folks like Miguel and his colleagues at the Pennsylvania Immigration Coalition. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right.
All right. We will keep following the work of the Pennsylvania Immigration Coalition. And you all who are at City Hall every week, you let us know what the mayor says and if the city begins to implement any of these policies.
Okay. Well, Vanessa, thank you so much for that. And now let me bring on Denise Clay Murray, who we haven't spoken to yet. Denise, how are you? Oh, you're muted there, Denise. Maybe that's why we haven't spoken to you yet. There you go.
it's kind of ironic that Vanessa was interviewing Mr. and great about the lack of implementation of the ICE policies. What everyone has to remember is that when the Trump administration took office and people were calling on Mayor Barber to be more outspoken about this kind of stuff, her silence was deafening.
Yeah.
That's what led to the package of ICE legislation needing to be passed in the first place. So the quickest way that you can not necessarily be associated with legislation you don't like is to not do anything even after it's passed. Just
Right.
because you signed something doesn't necessarily mean that your attitude toward that.
I think we have an audio issue there, Denise. So let me bring on Lance Haver here. Lance, how are you tonight?
I'm all right. Good evening. Vanessa, thank you very much for that great interview. Although it is disheartening. I'm wondering, Larry, when you get a chance to catch up with some of the members of council who were so excited to pass the bills, I'm wondering what they're saying or what they're doing to make sure the mayor enforces it.
Yep.
So maybe we'll get a chance to do that later. And thank you very much for the interview with the controller. It is, of course, something that Hall Monitor has been talking about and writing about for years. And I was excited to hear her say that she's going to conduct an audit of OPA. And that's part of what I'm going to be reporting on. But I think we ought to start with some very basic background. I'm going to see if I can't call up my slideshow to help people understand exactly what's happening. So real estate taxes are, of course, critical. And they're critical for funding the city and funding the school district. Most of the money actually goes, the highest percentage actually goes to the school district. But to understand what the real estate taxes are is very confusing. So this comes directly from the city's webpage. And it says the real estate taxes are due on March 31st, and the tax rate is 1.3998%. Now, during the course of my presentation reporting, I'm just going to call it 1.4% because it's a lot easier. The significance of the March 31st is most of us have mortgages. So most of us in our mortgage are paying our real estate taxes. Every month we pay 1/12 of the real estate tax. The mortgage company collects it. They get to keep it and put it in their bank, get interest on it, and they only have to pay it on March 30th because it's due March 31st. That being said, that 1.4%, that's what the mayor and city council vote on. During the budget hearings, during the budget, during the agreement on the budget, during the mayor's signing of the budget, 1.4% is what everybody agreed upon. Now it's the same as last year and the same as the year before and the same as the year before that. So you would think if the taxes haven't been raised, if council, our elected government, our city council members and the mayor didn't vote to raise taxes and it's the same tax rate, then taxes should be the same. But that's not how it works. There's two parts to our property taxes, what we pay. There's the assessed value, what the Office of Property Assessment, often called OPA, determines, and again, this comes directly from their webpage, determines what every piece of property within Philadelphia is worth. The assessed dollar value is used to calculate the property's real estate tax. So here's what happens. City council keeps the rate the same. Nobody has to vote to raise taxes. The mayor doesn't have to sign a bill to raise taxes. The budget doesn't have to have a tax increase in it. Instead, a bunch of nameless, faceless people through a bureaucracy called the Office of Property Assessment, OPA, decides to raise everybody's taxes. So here in Philadelphia, this is what many people consider the seat of American democracy, which started out, at least what we're told in history, in part, no taxation without representation. We have an unelected body, unelected assessors. Nobody knows who they are. No, probably no one's met them, who are deciding to raise our property taxes. What we owe, as I said, is the rate, the tax rate, which is the 1.4%, times what these assessors say our homes are worth. Now it gets a little more confusing because years ago, it wasn't what's called the actual value. It was a ratio. When during Mayor Nuther's administration, that was changed to use an actual value initiative. Now I'm going to say that again. So the tax is supposed to be based on what City Council and the mayor signs into law, 1.4%, times the actual value of your house. But we don't do that here in Philadelphia. We go with what the assessor says the value of the house is. So it's not the actual value. The only way to know what the actual value of the house is, according to economists, is when the house is sold. Other than that, it's an estimate. It's an appraisal. It's what somebody says it's worth. And the people who are making that decision are consciously raising taxes on purpose to give the city more money and give the mayor and council the camouflage to say that they're not the ones raising it. It's the oppressor. It's the assessors. So I guess that's a Freudian slip, oppressors, assessors. The significance of when this happens is also very real. City council passes the budget. They go on summer recess, and then the OPA, the Office of Property Assessment, sends out letters after the budget's done and after this council's gone. So the tax increase is really hidden and kept secret, and it's a windfall for the city of Philadelphia. Here's a lack of a better term, a slush fund. They make projections on how much they're going to get in real estate taxes and wage taxes and all the other taxes. And then there's a reassessment announced, and the tax rate stays the same, but the assessment goes up. So to review it, City of Philadelphia raises taxes without any elected official voting for the tax increase. The nameless, faceless assessors who answer to a board that is selected without any public input raise our taxes by raising our assessments. Now, in every other county in Philadelphia, this would be illegal. In every other county in Philadelphia, all the assessments have to be what's called revenue neutral. So if someone goes out and appraises everyone's house and says they're all worth more because of inflation, or for whatever reason, the county executives have to actually lower the tax rate. So if the assessment goes up in every other county in Pennsylvania, other than Philadelphia, the tax rate has to go down. Here in Philadelphia, we have this mechanism for the backdoor tax increase. Not a single elected official has to take responsibility for the taxes going up. In fact, they can brag about how they've lowered business taxes. But they know, just like everybody else knows, that the real tax increase is coming through these assessors. No place else in Pennsylvania would this be legal. Now, how significant is it? Well, the Pew Charitable Trust, which do many reports on the city of Philadelphia, the tax structure, and what's happening, they say that the taxes increased in the last 10 years have gone up by 60%. Now, we all know that few wages have gone up by 60%. People on Social Security haven't had a 60% increase. People on fixed incomes haven't had 60% increases. So it's become very, very difficult for people to stay in their homes. And the reason why the taxes keep going up is because these assessors look at the new condos and the new homes that all get 10-year tax abatements, and they say, well, that house is worth $1 million, and it's next to your house, and your house, therefore, must be worth much more because that house next to you is worth $1 million. And they call it comparables. They draw a circle around a mile, and they say anything 3 bedrooms, your house is 3 bedrooms, the new house is 3 bedrooms, they're comparable, and therefore your property values go up because a developer gets a 10-year tax break to create a new home and sell it for $1 million. Of course, you don't get the tax break, but you do get higher taxes. Everybody knows this is a problem. It's no secret. City of Philadelphia creates program after program after program to try and help people stay in their home. But almost all of the programs, with one exception, have very real limitations. There are formulas, how long you have to be in your house, how much your property taxes have to go up over a 5-year period, what your income is. The city controller, as great as her report was, and as wonderful as it was to have her on our TV show tonight, doesn't talk about how many people actually qualify for these programs. There's only one program that everybody in Philadelphia who lives in the home they own qualifies for, and that's called the homestead exemption. The homestead exemption says that the first $100,000 of what that assessor says your house is worth, you don't pay taxes on. Pennsylvania has a flat tax. It's in the state constitution. It's called the uniform tax. So we can't do what they're doing in New York and charge multi-million-dollar properties a higher tax than what we can charge $100,000. So to make the taxes a little more fair, we give out a real estate tax exemption. It's $100,000. If your house is worth $200,000, you get a 50% tax savings. If your house is worth $2 million, you only get a 5% tax savings. Now, the reason for that is not just because it's just and fair, it's also because without the exemption, a person who makes less money ends up paying a higher tax rate for real estate. Because the less you make, if the tax is flat, the higher percentage comes out of your income. So unlike payroll taxes, unlike even wage taxes, real estate tax would be, without the exemption, the less you make, the higher the tax bracket you're in. But here's where it creates a problem, and here's what I was hoping when we interviewed the controller she'd be willing to talk about today. Only 66% of the eligible homeowners get the homestead exemption. That's from a Pew study. And the controller announced today and 2 years ago that there's a whole bunch of what's called data mining tools that the city has that it uses to catch tax cheats. These are people who don't live in their homes, who say they qualify for the homestead exemption and shouldn't be getting it. The controller and the city of Philadelphia have been using these tools to catch these people and try and force them to pay their fair share of the taxes. It's great, it's wonderful. Everyone should be required to pay their share. We shouldn't allow tax cheats. But here's where the problem comes to. If they catch these people, that adds to the city revenue. But right now, they're not using those data mining tools to help find people who do qualify for the homestead exemption but aren't getting it. And again, the homestead exemption is worth $1,400 a year, every year, $1,400. Now, City Council held hearings on affordability. That is a new buzzword for politics, for elected officials. But here is a $1,400 homestead exemption that should be available to everyone who owns their own home, where we know only 66% of the people are getting it. And the city, instead of using their data mining tools to help everyone get it, are only using the data mining tools to go after the tax cheats. And it should be something where we talk about are not only should the city go after the tax cheats with this technology the city now has, but we should also be helping people. Yes, collecting more taxes helps everyone, but getting people a $1,400 tax break for something they're eligible for. This is because property taxes have gone up 60% in the last 10 years because people are being forced out of their homes. This is a program that helps stabilize neighborhoods, that helps keep people in their homes. And the city knows, it's no secret, 33% of the eligible people aren't getting it and is doing absolutely nothing about it. Again, it's one of those things where you would think that the city council would be demanding they use the data mining tools to make sure everyone gets it. And it would be one of those things where you would hope the controller who has the program, who has the ability, and as we just heard, really a brilliant woman, has the ability to do all of this, but is choosing not to. Hopefully, as she continues to look at OPA and she does her audit, she'll catch on that the system is stacked against us. And next week on the show, I'm going to go over what's currently happening at OPA.
All right. Well, Lance, thank you so much for that. And we will see you all next week on Hall Monitor.